Hi everyone, it's Rob Power here. I'm with the International Association for Mobile Learning, and I'm also an adjunct professor of educational technology with the University of Ontario Institute of Technology. And I'm speaking here today with Professor John Traxler from the University of Wolverhampton. Professor Traxler is the Vice President of the International Association for Mobile, and he's going to speak to us today about scalability and sustainability with mobile learning. So welcome, John.
Thanks a lot. I hope everyone can hear me, and thanks for the opportunity to engage with everyone out there and engage with you too, Rob.
Thank you, John. First of all, could you tell us a little bit about how mobile learning's changed in recent years compared to some of the earlier years of research and practice?
Well, I'm afraid in some respects I think it hasn't, and I'd regard that as a significant problem. There would be some people that would go to educational technology conferences, and ours amongst them, and say, weren't we doing this 15 years ago? Weren't we doing this 10 years ago? And weren't we doing this 5 years ago? And actually, the issue of scale might be one of the things we didn't do 15 years ago, and we didn't do 10 years ago, and we don't do now. So I think you're raising an important question. And I suppose when you ask if it's changed, I suppose what I'm saying is that we're still, I don't know, maybe living in the legacy of e-learning. We're trying to solve the problems or address the challenges or deliver on the aspirations of the e-learning community, when really that's in some senses a thing of the past, because most people don't conceive of the mobile as some cute miniature computer that you can carry around. Their experiences and their expectations about what you can do with the mobile come from a completely different direction. You know, their family, the media, their friends, recreation. You know, so in many respects, any of the answers to your questions have to be seen in that context, that what we've called, quote, unquote, mobile learning, I think is only a very small and possibly backward-looking set of activities compared to what people outside universities and colleges, ministries, schools are doing with their mobiles. So.
Okay, so John, could you tell us a little bit about what you mean when we talk about scalability and sustainability with mobile learning initiatives?
Well, again, I think you have to see the answer to that in the context of what I've just said. You can look at it in terms of the agenda of the quotes mobile learning research community and say, how do we get from small to big? And we've got an awful lot of evidence about small, but clearly it doesn't tell you very much about big. And the word itself, scalability, scaling up, sounds very kind of numerical, quantitative. It just sounds like doing what we did, but doing it on a larger scale. And I think that's problematic, because I don't think we've understood very much about the issues of operating on a larger scale, because we've been focused maybe on the issue of pedagogy and technology. But once you try scaling up, the issues are really rather different. They're about culture or organization. They're about capacity, and they're about working with everyone else as opposed to just working with the innovators and the researchers. So I guess that's what I hear those are the kinds of arguments I hear in people talking about scalability. Of course, that's only portraying it in terms of the agenda of the mobile learning research community. If you ask about people using their mobiles for learning, you know, for sharing stuff, for creating stuff, for talking about stuff, well, you don't need to scale that up. It's already happened. That's what they're all doing out there.
Okay, so when we're talking about scalability within educational organizations or within classroom type initiatives, why is scalability so difficult to achieve, or is it?
Well, I think in some respects it's trivially easy, and in some respects it's insuperably hard and difficult. I mean, it's made to sound easy because the technology scales up. You know, make a few more handsets, put a bit more infrastructure in. You know, because there are perceptions that many aspects of the technology itself, you have economies of scale. It's actually cheaper per unit to produce 1 million phones than it is to produce one. And a particular model of education, namely pumping out content, is also highly scalable. You know, you can broadcast it to one person, you can broadcast it to 1 million, no difference. That's the easy bit. I think the difficult bit is culture and organization and stuff like that. You know, where not everyone's the same, and the way they learn isn't the same. And what we've learnt about learning in the small scale context isn't necessarily going to scale up to a much more, I don't know, heterogeneous, lumpy constituency out there. You know, the wider we cast the net, the more different kinds of people we cover with that net, the more variability, diversity, changeability there is. And I suspect even if doing small scale experiments was teaching us much about scale, which I don't think it is, actually there's always going to be a year or two's difference by the time we get round to the scaling up. And some people have talked about the answer to scaling up is not going from small to big, but going from big to big. Find a big project somewhere, see what you can learn and use it here, rather than starting small and working upwards. It's a plausible argument.
Okay, so John, once schools or organizations or teachers have made the decision and taken steps to start integrating mobile technologies and mobile learning strategies into their practice, what do you see as the keys to sustaining those strategies, and are those keys different in different contexts?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I mean, I think so much of our problem and so much of our challenge is not understanding the importance of context or culture or people or organizations. And I think that when you answer that question, you get near to the issue of, again, recognizing that mobiles are pervasive, ubiquitous, universal, and to some extent, in one sense, the challenge is keeping them out of the class, of the school, of the university, because actually they're, well, in the words of one editorial, you know, people would rather lose their kidneys and lose their mobile, so they're going to bring them in to the class, the lecture theatre, the seminar room, and actually, and that's what gives you sustainability, because you're not paying for them, they're paying for them, and it's actually working with the grain of that rather than old models where we in the university, we in the school buy the hardware, control the hardware, maintain the hardware. Worrying about sustainability is part of a bigger problem about where is the agency and the control in the classroom if scalability and sustainability depend on them, the students, allowing us to use their technology, their systems, their networks, their hardware. So I think in some senses, I think as is often the case, talking about the technology is a proxy or an Aunt Sally, straw man, for talking about wider issues, you know, about the role of education. When suddenly teachers don't know everything and many of the class have access to far more information, but actually need to learn how to filter it and critically appraise it rather than just consume it from the teacher. Sorry, long answer.
Thank you, John. What would you like to see more of in terms of mobile learning research and practice in the years ahead?
Ooh, what will I see more of? Well, funding, maybe. Actually, well, more sociology, less psychology, almost. Recognizing that the use of mobiles is a social, as I say, pervasive, ubiquitous, universal phenomenon. Not homogenous or consistent. We all do it differently, but we all do it. And I think that's part of the legacy from educational technology has been a focus on aspects of psychology. And like I say, so more sociology, less psychology, maybe more information studies or anthropology. That's the kind of researcher's answer. Actually, more fundamental research on and research methods about mobility and moving around. And I worry that much of the research we do attempts to explore what we're doing by freezing it. And we haven't got used to the idea that it's no longer a frozen, static world that we can freeze and look at. It moves around, and we've got to find ways of exploring that world and then working inwards to the issue of learning, rather than assuming it's the same old world, but we've got cuter technology.
Okay, well, thank you, John. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we wrap up for this evening?
Well, assuming I got the answers to all of your questions correct, I think I'd like to find out about Canadian citizenship. There's a lot of people interested in, moving on, especially those of us living in the UK. So yeah, just tell me where to send my details, and I'll be right over.
Okay, well, thank you, John. I'm sure that you'd be a great asset to the Canadian education system and to the higher education research system in Canada, but that's a conversation for another day. Thank you very much for joining us, John, and thank you, everyone, for tuning in. The recordings podcast will be available anytime.